Good morning. Miss Elizabeth here for First Congregational Church of Muskegon, our youth worship confirmation class. This Sunday is the Unit 2, Many Ways, and Lesson 3 on Islam. Today we're going to talk about how learning about other religious practices can help us understand better our own spiritual path. This is taken from the Progressive Christianity curriculum that we're following, but I don't own the rights to the copyrights to that material, but we're starting off there. Today's lesson, like I said, is on Islam and the study of that. I wonder if you know this. If you have read the stories in the Bible, and there's many, very many stories in the Bible, but in the beginning of the Bible, the Old Testament, the very first chapter of the very first book of the Bible, Genesis, there's a section in that book of Genesis that talks about Abraham. And Abraham's descendants would eventually form an ancestry about how we believe we are related to our ancestor Abraham, who was a very loyal follower of God. Now, Abraham was a very, very long-lived person. He and his wife Sarah were in their 90s. Abraham was almost 100 years old when God promised them that they would have many, many descendants and that God would provide them that. Well, Sarah thought, oh my goodness, this is hopeless for me. I can't have children. And so she gave her maidservant, Hagar, to her husband, and they had a son together. Abraham and Hagar had a son whose name was Ishmael. And that made Hagar resent her mistress Sarah, and she was not happy being there. And so then God promised that Sarah would have a son. And Sarah did end up having a son whose name was Isaac. And you can find the story of this in Genesis book of Genesis chapter 16 talks about Hagar and Ishmael and how they left the land where Abraham and Sarah were and traveled across the desert. Well, the Islamic tradition, they have their central prophet is Muhammad, who they believe is descended from Ishmael. So we're related. And you see behind me here, this is a painting that I've done in part of a series that's my cousin and her daughter, and the series of paintings talks about our ancestors and how we're related. So really the traditions of Islam are related in a lot of surprising ways to Christianity. Did you know that the Islamic tradition has 5 pillars of their faith? And those are Number one, prayer is very important to them. They pray 5 times every day. The second pillar of their faith includes giving alms to the poor. So making donations to the poor. That's something that many Christians also do. The third pillar of their faith is fasting during the month of Ramadan. That's their faith tradition has this holiday where by fasting, going without, it brings them closer to God. The fourth pillar of their faith is pilgrimage, which their word for it is Hajj, and they make a pilgrimage to a place where they can feel a deeper spiritual connection. And the final pillar, fifth pillar of their faith, is a belief in one God. And I know that you can see that connection to Christianity. We also believe in one God, and that is one of the most important commandments, is to love your God first and only one God. And then another commandment that is like that and that God elevates to the same level is to love your neighbor as yourself. So the golden rule, which also is followed in the religion of Islam. So in Islam, the Arabic word for God is Allah. Muslims have 98 other names for God, which they recite using prayer beads. Is that similar to anything that you know of in a Christian tradition? What about a rosary? Many Catholic traditions use a rosary, which is a string of prayer beads, to help them remember and recite things that will ultimately bring them closer to their faith in God, just like in Islam. So I want to talk a little bit about these names for God. Some of them are things like the Creator. You may have heard Reverend Tim say things at the close of each sermon. He says, our Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer. Those are all different names for God. And to me, it sounds a little bit like the names that boxers sometimes take. The Greatest, the Wise, the Great One, All-Knowing, the Creator, the Light. So I feel like maybe a fun exercise would be to, within your family, like set a timer and make as many list as many names of God that you can think of, who can come up with the most. Here's a few that are in the Islamic tradition: the Timeless, the Patient, the Eternal, the Hidden, the Unmanifest, the Inner, the Beginningless, the Loving, the Wise, the Great, the all-knowing, the creator, the source of peace, the compassionate, and the light. So those are all different names. If you wanted to add a little bit of fun to your game of listing as many names as you can, you might start off with, instead of on your mark, get set, go, are you ready to rumble? Go. List your names. Let me know in the comments how many you come up with. See you next time. Thanks for watching.